Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Monday, June 16th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today will be quite warm, with a high expected to reach 96.4 degrees Fahrenheit. The low will settle at 67.9 degrees tonight. Be sure to stay cool and hydrated as temperatures rise throughout the day. Later in the program, we'll delve into how the Justice Department is reportedly shifting its election-related focus and what that could mean. Also, we'll take a closer look at a controversial health bill that appears to be encountering significant challenges on its legislative journey. That's all coming up right after this on Alex's News. Welcome back, everyone. We begin this morning with a significant shift unfolding within the U.S. Department of Justice, one that could profoundly impact future elections. For more on this developing story, we turn to our national correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, it seems the DOJ is charting a new course under Attorney General Pam Bondi. What can you tell us about this change?
Grace, that's right. As of today, June 16, 2025, the U.S. Department of Justice, now led by Attorney General Pam Bondi, is indeed making some early moves in how it approaches voting and elections. This isn't just a minor tweak. According to reporting from NPR News and the Bangor Daily News, both citing the Associated Press, the department is refocusing its resources and legal actions away from broad voter access protection. Instead, it's shifting towards what they call the, quote, technical machinery, end quote, of elections, and addressing concerns largely raised by conservative activists.
And when did Attorney General Bondi assume her role?
Attorney General Pam Bondi took the helm on February 5, 2025, following her nomination by President Donald Trump. So, all Department of Justice actions from that date forward fall under her purview, marking a clear change in direction from previous leadership.
Historically, the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, specifically its voting section, has focused on safeguarding access to the ballot box. How does this new approach differ from that traditional role?
Traditionally, Grace, the department has focused on enforcing the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to combat discriminatory practices and ensure broad voter access. But now, there's a clear strategic pivot. The department is prioritizing the investigation of alleged voter fraud and perceived technical malfeasance in election administration. This, according to NPR News, aligns with the rhetoric of President Trump and his allies, who have made unsubstantiated claims of widespread fraud. This strategic shift has also coincided with the departures of career attorneys and decisions to drop various voting rights cases initiated during the previous administration.
So less about access and more about what they call, quote, technical machinery, end quote.
Precisely. Critics are calling this a, quote, radical transformation, end quote. The voting section's revised mission statement now emphasizes preventing, quote, illegal voting, fraud, and other forms of malfeasance and error, end quote. A departure from its historical mandate of combating racial discrimination in voting. It's a completely different focus.
And we're seeing this play out in various states, particularly presidential battlegrounds. Let's start with North Carolina.
In North Carolina, Grace, the DOJ filed a lawsuit just last month, in May 2025, against the state and its State Board of Elections. The lawsuit alleges violations of the Help America Vote Act of 2002, or HAVA. HAVA is a federal law aimed at improving election administration. The DOJ asserts that North Carolina's voter registration form failed to mandate the collection of identifying information, such as a driver's license number as required by HAVA. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet K. Dillon stated, according to AP News, that accurate voter rolls are, quote, critical, end quote, and that the Justice Department, quote, will not hesitate to file suit against jurisdictions that maintain inaccurate voter registration rolls, end quote. While the state's new Republican majority board is committed to compliance, Democratic Party Chair Anderson Clayton and Common Cause North Carolina worry these changes could lead to voter disenfranchisement. This lawsuit is also tied to a broader executive order President Trump signed in March 2025 focused on, quote, preserving and protecting the integrity of American elections, end quote.
It seems they're really trying to scrub the voter rolls clean. Are we seeing similar actions in other states?
We are, Grace. In Arizona, the DOJ sent a letter to election officials, warning them to clearly instruct voter registration applicants to provide a driver's license if they have one, and requesting a review for non-citizens on the rolls. Democratic Secretary of State Adrian Fontes noted Arizona already requires proof of citizenship, highlighting a potential disconnect. In Wisconsin, a letter accused the State Election Commission of not providing a sufficient complaint process, aligning with Republican legislative efforts there, as electionline.org reports. And in Colorado, the department demanded all election records going back to 2020 based on an unspecified complaint. Democratic Secretary of State Jenna Griswold called this a, quote, fishing expedition, end quote, and former Deputy Assistant Attorney General Justin Levitt described the request as, quote, well out of bounds, end quote, according to the Columbian.
And what about Oregon?
In Oregon, the DOJ weighed in on an ongoing lawsuit filed by the conservative group Judicial Watch, which alleges the state has failed to comply with federal laws on maintaining voter lists. So they're really sticking to the letter of the law, or at least how they interpret it, across multiple states.
Ethan, this is a lot to unpack. Thank you for shedding light on the Justice Department's new electoral focus. We'll be keeping a close eye on these developments.
My pleasure, Grace.
That was Ethan with our first story of the day. This report draws on reporting from NPR News, Bangor Daily News, electionline.org, and a variety of other news organizations, including apenews.com, columbian.com, 947qdr.com, and cbsnews.com, among many others. Coming up next, we'll dive into... Welcome back, everyone. We turn now to Capitol Hill, where a major piece of legislation is facing an uphill battle in the Senate after a nail-biting vote in the House. For more on the Republican Party's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, we go to our reporter, Chloe. Chloe, this bill certainly has a grand title. What is its current standing?
Thanks, Grace. You're right, the name suggests a smooth ride, but this bill's path is anything but. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, spearheaded by House Republicans, barely squeaked through the U.S. House on May 22, 2025, with a razor-thin 215 to 214 vote. It's now in the Senate, where it is being handled through the budget reconciliation process. This means it only needs a simple majority to pass. But even with that, dissent from just a few Republican senators could completely derail it. And there's a looming deadline, Grace, a July 4th deadline, which is just 18 days away, according to Senate.gov and apenews.com.
18 days is not a lot of time for such a significant piece of legislation. What exactly are the core provisions of this bill, especially when it comes to Medicaid?
At its heart, Grace, the bill proposes sweeping changes to Medicaid, the federal state health insurance program that serves low-income Americans, the elderly, and individuals with disabilities. The most significant changes include new work requirements for able-bodied adults, alongside more frequent eligibility checks, and alterations to state funding mechanisms. Specifically, according to ABC News and the Niagara-Gazette.com, non-disabled adults under 65 who are not caretakers or parents would be mandated to engage in work, classes, or community service for 80 hours per month. This requirement is slated to begin at the end of 2026.
So what kind of impact are these changes projected to have on coverage, especially for those currently relying on Medicaid?
The potential impacts are quite substantial, Grace. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, or CBO, projects that the bill's proposed changes to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act could lead to 10.9 million fewer people having health coverage overall. Breaking that down further, nearly 8 million fewer people would be enrolled in Medicaid by 2034 or 2035, depending on the CBO projections cited. And here's the striking number: 5.2 million of those would lose coverage specifically due to the new work requirements. Additionally, ABC News and the Niagara-Gazette.com report that 1.4 million immigrants without legal status are expected to lose coverage in state programs, as the bill penalizes states for funding their health insurance.
Those numbers are certainly eye-opening. What about the financial implications? Republicans have framed this as a way to curb waste.
Indeed, Grace. House Republicans were instructed to find $880 billion in cuts from programs under the Energy and Commerce Committee, which includes Medicaid. The Kaiser Family Foundation, or KFF, projects that the House-passed version of the bill would result in a $793 billion or $792 billion reduction in Medicaid spending. Another CBO analysis, as synthesized from NPR, CBS News, and Newsweek, indicated that the various healthcare-related portions of the bill could lead to at least 8.6 million people becoming uninsured, but would reduce the federal deficit by at least $715 billion over the next decade.
Are there any other notable provisions in this act beyond the work requirements and financial cuts?
Yes, there are a couple, Grace, that are drawing particular scrutiny. The bill proposes a freeze on a healthcare provider tax imposed by the House Ways and Means Committee. While critics argue this tax improperly boosts federal Medicaid payments to states, supporters like Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri contend it provides important funding for rural hospitals. He's expressed concern, according to ABC News and the Niagara-Gazette.com, that its removal could lead to their closure and cause working citizens to lose benefits. The bill also includes a ban on Medicaid funding for gender-affirming care for both minors and adults, as detailed by synthesis from NPR.org, CBSNews.com, and Newsweek.com.
So, how do Republicans justify these sweeping changes, especially given the projections of so many losing coverage? And what does the research say about their claims?
Republicans, including Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso, insist they are not cutting Medicaid. Instead, they frame the changes as rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse, and protecting limited resources for the most vulnerable, such as pregnant women, children, seniors, and individuals with disabilities. Speaker Johnson, for example, highlighted 4.8 million people on Medicaid right now nationwide who are able-bodied workers, young men, for example, who are not working, who are taking advantage of the system. And Senator Barrasso, according to reporting synthesized from healthlaw.org, apnews.com, and the Niagara-Gazette.com, criticized non-working recipients for allegedly spending time watching television and playing video games instead of seeking employment.
Those are strong accusations. But what do studies and past experiences tell us about these claims of waste and abuse among Medicaid recipients?
Grace, research and experience from previous state-level Medicaid work requirement implementations often tell a very different story. The Kaiser Family Foundation notes that over 90% of current Medicaid enrollees who would be subject to these new rules already meet similar criteria. That means they are already working, caregiving, in school, or ill. Studies indicate that a majority of adult Medicaid beneficiaries under 65 are working, often in low-wage jobs that do not offer employer-sponsored health insurance. For those not working, the most common reasons are caregiving responsibilities, personal health issues or disabilities, or attending school, as detailed in research findings from KFF.org and healthaffairs.org.
So, if most are already meeting these criteria, what happens when these work requirements are implemented? Have we seen this play out before?
We have, Grace, past state experiments, such as in Arkansas from June 2018 to March 2019, consistently show that work requirements have led to significant coverage losses without a corresponding increase in employment rates. In Arkansas, over 18,000 individuals, about a quarter of those subject to the policy, lost their Medicaid coverage. Research found no significant change in employment among the target population. The primary reasons for coverage loss were administrative hurdles, such as difficulty navigating complex reporting systems or documenting exemptions, rather than an unwillingness to work. Even individuals already working or qualifying for exemptions struggled with challenges like lack of awareness of rules, limited internet access, or difficulty obtaining necessary documentation. The CBO's analysis itself aligns with these findings, projecting a negligible effect on employment status or hours worked, but a significant increase in the number of uninsured individuals.
Fascinating, or perhaps disheartening, findings. How are Democrats and the public reacting to this bill?
House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries has sharply criticized the bill as an assault on the health care of the American people, warning it threatens years of progress in reducing the number of uninsured, as reported by ABC News and the Niagara-Gazette.com. As for public opinion, ABC News indicates that health care is not a strong issue for former President Trump. A March CNN poll showed 56% disapproval of his handling of health care, and most Americans want the government more involved in ensuring health care coverage. Many also fear that Trump administration policies would increase their costs and weaken Medicaid.
And what about its future in the Senate? You mentioned it's a precarious path with that July 4th deadline. Are there any specific senators holding out?
Absolutely, Grace. While budget reconciliation allows for passage with a simple majority, several key Republican senators have publicly expressed reservations. Senators Susan Collins of Maine, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, and Josh Hawley of Missouri have emerged as prominent voices of concern regarding the bill's Medicaid provisions, as reported by CBSNews.com and Politico.com. Senator Hawley has stated his red line is no Medicaid cuts, and while he supports work requirements, he is staunchly opposed to new co-payment requirements, what he calls a sick tax, and the freeze on provider taxes, arguing the latter could lead to the closure of rural hospitals in his state and across the country. Senators Collins and Murkowski have echoed concerns about potential harm to vulnerable populations and healthcare access. Senate Republican leadership is actively considering amendments, reportedly focusing on paring back some of the more stringent Medicaid cuts. Any significant changes made by the Senate would require the bill to be sent back to the House for another vote, a precarious prospect given its extremely narrow initial passage. It's certainly going to be a nail-biter as we approach that July 4th deadline.
Indeed it will, Chloe. Well, I'll be watching closely to see if this bill can get past its rocky road in the Senate. Thank you for that incredibly comprehensive update.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. Up in the Canadian Rocky Mountains, it seems international relations are also on rocky ground. Leaders of the G7 are gathered in Kananaskis, Alberta, for their 50th anniversary summit, where the agenda is a mountain of contentious issues. Hosted by Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, the group is carefully navigating the Trump factor, hoping to avoid a repeat of the 2018 summit's diplomatic fallout. A key priority for European leaders is convincing President Trump to cool down the global trade war. With the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East also demanding urgent attention, diplomats are reportedly opting for chair summaries instead of a full joint statement, trying to make sure this summit is something to talk about, not something to walk out on. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is among the invited guests expected to meet with President Trump. Turning to the global economy, it's a tale of two sectors in China. While factory output is feeling the squeeze from U.S. tariffs, retail sales are getting a big lift. Consumer spending surged 6.4% in May, thanks in part to a clever pivot. With a Great Wall of tariffs making exports difficult, many companies, with help from e-commerce giants, are now selling those goods at home, turning a trade challenge into a domestic shopping spree. This strategy of export to domestic sales is helping boost the local market, even as manufacturing slows under the weight of the ongoing trade dispute, with exports to the U.S. falling by 35%. In Minnesota, a shocking act of political violence has left a community reeling. 57-year-old Vance Bolter is in custody after what authorities are calling a politically motivated assassination spree. He's accused of impersonating a police officer to kill State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, and wound State Senator John Hoffman and his wife over the weekend. Following a massive 36-hour manhunt, Bolter surrendered to police. He now faces murder and attempted murder charges. Authorities say the tragedy could have been even worse, as Bolter may have had a list of other potential targets in several states. And a horrifying story out of north-central Nigeria, where a weekend massacre in the village of Yelawata has left at least 100 people dead. Officials say suspected armed herdsmen stormed the community in Benue State, locking families in their homes and burning them alive. The attack is the latest escalation in a long-running and violent conflict over land and resources between herders and farming communities. While the state governor has condemned the unnecessary bloodbath, critics, including Amnesty International and even Pope Francis, have faulted the government's response as insufficient to stop the recurring violence. Finally, from Saudi Arabia, journalist Turki Al-Jasser was executed this past Saturday after 7 years in prison. The government stated he was guilty of treason and terrorism, but human rights groups say the charges were a pretext to silence him for a Twitter account that allegedly exposed royal corruption. Activists, who claim Al-Jasser was tortured in detention, are drawing parallels to the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, arguing this is another grim example of the kingdom's crackdown on dissent, amid what they call a dramatic increase in executions. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.